Hello.
Howdy.
We're back. Look at us doing this basically weekly.
We didn't do one last week, but we did 2 the week before.
Yeah, and we did that on like a Saturday. So
It's fine. We're doing better.
we're getting there. We're getting back to doing this regularly.
Now that nothing new has happened and we're trying to get it back to a weekly thing, we were really struggling to think of things, even though we've got like a page full of topics, but
We got
nothing
like
we're really calling
10
to us,
topics.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But today we're doing character development because it's important.
Yes.
It is essential to any good character arc, mostly because it is the only thing that a character arc is composed of.
It's character development and character arcs all in the same thing.
It is usually character arcs are usually tied more with events in the story, whereas usually sometimes development is too, but like character development's normally like they go from this type of personality to this type of personality, and the arc is basically just the story of the character. But
okay, so
it's like, they're pretty much the same thing.
Well, a character arc is the story of their development.
Yeah, they're basically the same.
So, there's a lot of stuff about character development because it's important. Because, every character needs a good character arc.
If your character is the same as they were in the beginning of the story as they are in the end, they're either a side character or they are a bad character.
And, it doesn't have, we're gonna be using some pretty dramatic examples. It doesn't always have to be this, dramatic. All the ones we have are basically, complete 180s in their personality. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be, more subtle.
Yeah, it could be, you were talking about people that go from being, dregs of humanity to being, heroes. But, it's not always that way. It could be, I just randomly thought of this while you were saying that sentence. But, a lot of the characters from, on High School Host Club, they're very different at the end than they were in the beginning, how he was started out kind of jaded and cynical and I hate these fucking rich people, and by the end she really grown to love these people.
Character development could be going from being a good person to just a better person. It could be overcoming something that was holding them back.
It could be going from being the dregs of humanity to being a really good person.
It could be overcoming something that was something about themselves that was holding them back, but didn't necessarily make them a worse person. Mm-hmm. Neville from Harry Potter, he's a pretty good example of a more chill character. He was good at the beginning, he was nice, he was a good human, and then he just got braver and bolder and more heroic, even if he was nice at the beginning.
Yeah, he was really nice, but he was really timid, and he felt like he always messed everything up, and that he wasn't good enough. And then eventually he was like, hey, I'm good at things, maybe just not the things that I thought I was good at.
More confident, more brave. It was good.
And then
he
fucking
fucking
rocked
character.
Yeah, he just fucking rocked Nagini's shit. I don't know why I've been saying that so much. It's just really funny. It's really funny.
Sometimes, the ones you talk about with our in High School Host Club, they don't, really improve in any way. Sometimes they're just different.
Yeah.
And, that's okay, too.
Yeah,
But the ones we're talking about today are all,
they did, real 180.
I also have something that might, come up in our discussion, which is something I actually saw in another video, I think by Overly Sarcastic Productions is the channel name. Mm-hmm. I watch some of the videos sometimes, and by that I mean there's, 2 weeks where I just binge watch, half the videos and then just never looked at them again.
Nice.
I might, though, because they were good videos.
Uh-huh.
But they did one about, character development. I think it was, specifically, redemption arcs.
Mm-hmm.
which again is what most of the ones we're talking about, that's what it's called, redemption arcs.
Yeah.
A character arc is just any change in a character from the beginning to the end, and a redemption arc is when one's shitty at the beginning and then they're good by the end.
Yeah.
There's a thing, but...
Like Nebula.
Yeah, she was another
Half
one.
the people we're talking about are Marvel characters.
They're really good at characters.
They're really good at
though.
characters,
Marvel,
and it's
MCU,
also we haven't recovered from ENDGAME yet, so
yeah.
it's still the
Our
only
brain
thing we
is
want to
still,
talk
like,
about.
Our brain is still like 60% just like Marvel.
Yes.
And also they're really good at character writing. It's one of their strong
they
suits. It's
are.
why so many people love the movies so much.
I know.
Anyway.
We're gonna be going through
But-
these characters. We'll give a little spoiler
I didn't
warning.
get to
Oh.
finish
Oh.
my point.
Okay.
But, like, basically the point they made in their video is that there's, like, a spectrum of character arcs where, like, some from basically being entirely someone else changing them to, like, it being, like, entirely them,
Mm-hmm.
like, self-reflecting and changing. And usually most of them fall somewhere in the middle, like, with something or someone else. Like a common one is, like, a person who's less shitty talking to them and then like convincing them to be less shitty. Like that's kind of like in the middle because someone else helped them, but then they ultimately made the decision and came to their conclusion. So like that's and like entirely, I think something they mentioned is that entirely someone else is usually like, it's not very common in like media for adults or young adults. It's usually for like kids stuff, like someone was like, because, you know, kids' stuff has to be really pure and wholesome.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, oh, they were just possessed by some evil magic or something.
Yeah.
And then, like, entirely internal is something that basically, like, never happens. Because, like, usually as in real life, usually something has to prompt you to do some self-reflection.
Yeah.
Generally. You don't
Yeah.
just decide, you don't just wake up one morning.
And you're like, I'm a horrible human trying to fix that.
Yeah, like some outside person or force or event prompts you to do that.
Yeah. But anyway.
I thought that was something we needed
Yeah,
to
that's
talk about.
it's important to
'Cause, like,
understanding different arcs.
Generally, the closer they are to more internal sometimes, the better they seem. They're not always, like... Usually middle to, like, fully internal is, like, the good. It's, like, where you, like, pretty golden.
Yeah. So we're gonna be going through these characters. They're from different things, so we'll put like a little bit of we'll put a spoiler warning for each of the things before we start talking about the characters.
Yeah.
So we're gonna kick it off, I guess, with your boy Fakir, who
From
like
Princess Tutu.
literally
If
none of you
don't-
people have heard
No
of that.
one watching this video has heard of him or the show he's from.
It is our
But-
favorite anime. Probably if they have heard about it, it's just from us previously talking about it. Because we've
Listen,
done
I
it
promise
before.
we'll talk about people you have actually heard of.
But if you
in-
haven't watched Princess
Surely.
Tutu, we're going to be spoiling the shit out of it.
And you should watch it.
And you
It's a
should
really
watch
good
it
show.
because it's so good.
Even
It's
if
on
you-
Amazon Instant Video, and it's my favorite anime, and Fakir is one of my favorite characters in all of anything ever.
And if you don't like anime, you should still watch it because it's still like good.
Yeah, it's
And it
not
has
like...
a good dub too, so you don't even have to worry about subtitles. And
Yeah,
stuff.
and like I feel like a lot of anime, even if it's not like a really weird anime, it still has like some of those like anime things.
I mean, it's technically a magical girl anime, which is very like specifically an anime thing.
But it doesn't really feel like
It doesn't
that.
like it technically is, but like if you're not an anime person, it'll just probably feel like a fantasy thing.
Yeah.
It's not like Sailor Moon levels of like.
It's the first anime that I ever watched, so I think it's a pretty good way to get introduced to anime, because it doesn't really have, it's got like a little bit of that anime weirdness, but not like a lot
Not a
of
whole
it.
lot of it. if
And it doesn't got, like, any fan service in it or anything.
No,
it's
it's
very
like,
wholesome.
If you're not a fan of anime, the only thing that would tip you off that this is anime is probably, like, the art style, and I guess if you're watching, like, subtitles, the fact that it's in Japanese.
You know, I've never found I literally can't find, like, the original audio for it. I've only ever seen the dub.
Yeah, so you'll put the dub is fine. Like, usually
dubs
dubs are garbage, the dub is fine.
The dub is good.
We watched it for the first time with the dub because it was just the default setting on Amazon.
It's a good dub, the voice actors are good. Sometimes the delivery's a little weird, but
because they have to keep up with them.
Because they have to keep up with the pacing of, you know, the Japanese is a really fast language. Take it from someone who's trying to learn it. But basically, it's a good anime. The dub is good, and the weirdly delivered lines don't really make it bad. It's just kind of something you can laugh at, but find a bit endearing.
I honestly didn't even notice it until, like, the third time I watched it. So, like,
is your foot hurting?
I just thought it was like I guess I noticed it. I just thought it was like a weird thing with the show, and I didn't, like, put together it was because it was dubbed, which in a way makes it better because it wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, fuck you.
Sales pitch over.
Sales pitch over. Watch Princess Tutu. The name is stupid, but the show is good. So Fakir is really just like the OG and good character.
He has probably one of the best character arcs in, like, anything ever.
My boy, love him. He goes from just the literal worst person, like,
just garbage,
just really garbage. Just like, he's blunt. He's an unfriendly asshole who's super controlling, and he's out here, like, threatening, like, 14-year-old girls with, like, murder.
He's like 15.
He's like 15, but that kind of doesn't really make it any better, because he's a 15-year-old who's legitimately willing to kill. He emotionally abuses his best friend, who, like, he would if his best friend had emotions. That's sort of the point.
Yeah, he can't really, technically can't emotionally abuse someone who has no emotions and no concept of anything.
So,
just
part of that makes it a little bit less bad, because it's like, Muto doesn't care.
Yeah, Muto doesn't give a shit.
He about anything.
He can't even feel physical pain. He's just an empty husk of a person.
If you haven't watched the show and you're still watching this part, the basic premise of it is that there's an author who died
in the middle of writing a story. And the prince, it was like a fairy tale. The prince and the villain, who was a raven, escaped.
Because he never finished it, they were basically always locked in this eternal battle. So they escaped from the book and into this town, and the prince ended up shattering his own heart to lock the raven away. That
makes sense. It's a fantasy book.
It's a fairy tale.
Just go with it.
Just go with it. So, basically, the main characters are a girl named Rue, who's in love with Muto, and Muto is the prince from the story who doesn't have his heart anymore, and therefore he has no emotions, no sense of pain, no sense of urgency, no, like, common sense, or basically any concept of anything.
According to the show, his heart is basically just his brain, and without it, he is useless.
And then there's Fakir, who is the reincarnation of a knight from the story, among various other things.
And his job is to protect Muto.
Yeah, and then the main character, Duck, who's a duck. You know those animes where a girl can turn into an animal. In this show, it's an animal that can turn into a girl. Okay, hold on, wait. You know those shows where a girl can turn into an animal? And you know those shows where a girl can turn into like a magical fairy girl with special powers? This show is about an animal that can turn into a girl that can turn into a weird fairy princess with magic powers.
And that's the main character.
She's the main character. She's great. She's either a duck or a 14-year-old girl with really long hair and a cowlick who can turn into Princess Tutu, hence the name of the show, who is a character from the book and is basically charged with getting Muto his heart back. Now that you understand the basics of the show...
Or maybe you don't.
Or maybe you don't. Basically, Fakir is spending his time basically locking Muto in various cupboards.
Just because he's trying to stop him from dying. Because as we said, he has no common sense.
So, he does things that from the outside seem really horrific, and they're definitely shitty. Like, you know, that time when he just straight up locked Muto in a closet in the library.
Because he actually did have some emotions at that point.
That was why he locked him in there. But
Not
you know,
that
he like
many, but like
he like yells at him all the time. He like makes him stay in his room and is like, "Don't read any books except the ones that I tell you." He's just really aggressive with him.
Muto doesn't care.
Muto doesn't care.
Husk of a person who's just like, okay.
But also, he has no reason to do that to Muto. I get that it's frustrating to try to keep a guy that has no sense of self-preservation from just launching into weird whirlpools or like jumping out of windows with no pants on to save a bird, both of which happen in the show, by the way. I know that's frustrating. He did the bird thing like 3 times.
He almost died like 3 times.
He almost died like 3 times by falling out of a window while trying to get a bird.
What we're talking about now is actually kind of part of why his character arc was so great, because they explain his reasons for how he acted, for how he was acting, which is basically just Muto has no emotions, so it doesn't really matter. And Muto also has no common sense, so if I don't watch him every second of every day, he will die.
Yeah, it's like they explain his reasoning behind things, but don't try to justify his actions.
They don't act like that makes it okay, because it doesn't, and like he clearly shows remorse for those actions. Even though, again, Muto had no emotion, so it like really didn't matter.
Yeah, except he kind of started acting worse towards him when he started regaining his heart. Because another big part of Fakir's character is that part of the reason why he acted so, like, mean and awful and controlling wasn't because he just wanted to act that way, but because he was just a scared 15... Like, he's a child. Okay, I'm a child, and I'm 4 years older than him. He is a babby.
And he has to keep this dude alive, and also in the fairy tale, the knight that he's the reincarnation of was murdered brutally by the Raven.
So, he wants to protect Muto, but he's very brash, and he's also kind of too scared to do it. He has this, like, mantle of, like, this knight who just protected the prince to hold up, that he, like, wants to uphold, but he's terrified of doing that because the knight died horribly, and he doesn't want to die horribly.
So he doesn't want the story to progress, and if Muto gets his emotions, gets his heart back, then the story is progressing. So he wants to keep Muto as an empty husk of a person, which isn't great.
It's not great, but it's understandable.
Yeah.
And we learn about that part of his motivation about halfway through the show. Yeah, and then after that, you know, you're like, okay, like at that point you're like, okay, he's crying under a tree now. I feel kind of bad for him. He's 15 and he doesn't want to basically sign a death pact. That's fine.
Sympathy points will also get you quite a while with character arcs.
Yeah, but basically throughout the series, like basically for the second half of the show, he learns to fight to protect Muto in his own way, which isn't, you know, like going at things with the sword, because he's a knight, but it's like basically trying to, like, you know, hone these skills that he was, you know, originally very scared of in order to help his friends.
And it's like his character arc is very gradual. It starts by establishing that he isn't 100% the worst. When he's nice to Duck when she's in duck form.
And he doesn't know it's her.
So he doesn't know he has to keep up his because that's another thing. He wanted to be really aggressive and intimidating so people wouldn't, like, try to fuck with him or Muto. Which is a little more understandable than, like, everything else he did. But since it was, like, a duck, he was like, I don't have to do that. So it was, like, established that he wasn't the 100% awful in every way. And then, you know, they outline his reasons for why he was awful, and then he, like, starts to have to interact with Duck, because, like, Muto goes missing, so they have to go, since they're both kind of in charge of, like, saving him.
Yeah.
They have to go together.
Like, Duck's and, like, let's work together, and he's like, fine.
And then, so she kind of, like, rubs off on him a little, and he starts to become a little nicer and starts softening up a bit, and then he faces his fear of death.
Yeah, he realized...
He does live. He survives.
Yeah, he decides, you know, I gotta protect Muto even if that means that I die. And then he doesn't die. And then he's like, maybe I can find a different way to help Muto so I don't die.
And then he just becomes nicer. So at that point, like, by that point, you're like, okay, he's a decent human, and then gradually he just keeps getting better. And he basically just becomes, like, really grumpy and sarcastic, but, like, good at heart, and, like, really nice.
Yeah, he's, like, sarcastic as hell, easily irritated, really easily embarrassed, also. And then, but in, like, an endearing way now, because you know that he's not an actual asshole. Like, there's no bite to it, and he's pretty sarcastic with Duck, but he also really likes Duck, like, really likes Duck. If you know what I'm saying. So, which is a little weird, because she is a duck, but, like, she's also...
She's a human most of the time.
She's a human most of the time. She has human emotions. Human sentience. It's fine.
There's, like, no difference between her and there's no difference between her as a duck who can turn into a girl, and it's like if she was just a girl that could turn into a duck.
Yeah.
Like, there's no difference there.
Yeah. He just becomes a very soft but sarcastic guy who gets these, like, really...
Sarcastic and grumpy on the outside, soft on the inside.
Who cares very deeply about his friends, tries his best to protect them. It's this whole... A big part of his arc is basically he wants to protect, at first, Muto, and then Muto and Duck, and he keeps not being able to, and he keeps having to try to overcome that and find his own way to protect them. That's, like,
part of his regular character arc and not just his, like, redemption arc.
Yeah, and he eventually ends up kind of coming to terms with the fact that, you know, he's not a perfect protector, but he can do what he can, and he comes to terms with, you know, basically the story progressing and the story ending, even if that means that he loses some of his friends.
Yeah.
It's very good.
And he, like, you almost forget how much of an asshole he was at the beginning.
And then he's much more bearable when you rewatch it, because you know he's better by the end.
And, like, you know, he's very regretful of the way he used to be.
Yeah.
Quite clearly, he even, like, says it out loud. It's like, usually people being regretful of the way they used to act is just sort of implied in, like, the fact that they don't act like that anymore.
Yeah.
So, like, you just can sort of assume, because, like, you know, that's how, like, people behave. Like, when you realize something you were doing is kind of shitty,
You just stop doing it.
You don't, like, announce to the world that, like, what you were doing and shit. You just sort of stop and just hope people, like, assume.
Yeah, but he straight up was like, I'm not gonna do this anymore because it was bad. Like, he's like, I am no longer going to treat Muto like shit and try to, like, lock him away in the dark. I am gonna be a good person now. And we're like, hell fucking yeah.
Me.
Yeah, we're like, hell yeah, dude. You
don't
go.
Die, but, like, yeah.
Yeah, I believe in you. We stan. Anyway.
Moving right along.
You have Doctor Strange next, right?
Yes.
I didn't do this in, like, the best organized order, so we'll do Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange!
We're on to the people you've actually heard of. Are you happy? Are you satisfied?
We don't have to explain the premise of Doctor Strange to you. You know
Unless
who
you
Doctor Strange is.
I guess.
You know who Doctor Strange is.
He's a neurosurgeon who was an asshole, and then he got in a car wreck, and he couldn't, and his hands got fucked up, and he couldn't be a surgeon anymore, so he goes to a magical wizard temple to heal himself, and instead he learns to become a wizard, and just becomes a wizard, and becomes a superhero wizard. And that's Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange in 15 seconds or less. So he starts off kind of similar to someone else on this list.
A complete selfish, egotistical asshole.
Just a cocky, rich, narcissistic, self-absorbed piece of shit.
Again, like someone else on this list.
Yeah. I'm sure you can't guess who that is at all.
Not like they're from the same franchise.
You're making it too obvious now. You know, he was helping people. He was a doctor, but him helping people was almost kind of like an excuse that he, like, kind of used to convince himself that he was, like, a good person even when he wasn't.
Although he was very much, like, show-offy about it.
He was very show-offy about it.
Maybe he didn't actually, like, care that much about, like, helping people. He was just sort of like, I just want to prove that I'm really smart and good at things, so I'm a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was like. Like at one point in the movie, he was just like, I swore not to do any harm as a doctor, and now I just killed somebody, and, like, that was the thing. But it was also, like, he wasn't down to, like, it was, like, he wouldn't take on patients that would ruin his perfect record, which kind of goes against everything that doctors usually stand for.
No,
so he did.
That line you mentioned did kind of prove that maybe it wasn't all just, like, it did prove that he maybe did genuinely care about people not dying.
Yeah, he did. He didn't want to feel responsible for someone's death, but he also was mostly a doctor, and, like, the Ancient One said this too, basically to, like, save himself, and to, like, prove, like, that he's smart, and he's really good, and, like...
He's a decent person.
He's a decent person.
He's a doctor.
Doctors are good people, even though he's just really self-absorbed.
Even if he's a little egotistical, doctors are good people. They're helping people.
Yeah, so is, like, you know, basically convincing himself that he was a good guy despite some of the shitty things that he did.
But after...
Because he was kind of a bitch.
But at the end, he was willing to sacrifice himself to save the world.
Yeah.
Which is, he's actually technically willing to sacrifice himself for eternity to save the world, which is...
It's like he hit rock bottom and then basically turned to magic, which he obviously didn't believe in before. He's a neurosurgeon. And through learning magic, he also learned, you know, like, humility and selflessness. And he's still really self-assured, but, like, he found something else other than being a doctor that he can do to help people. And unlike being a doctor, he, like, truly devoted himself to it to the point where he, you know, had self-sacrifice for things.
Yeah.
Which he
It was
didn't
like-
as a doctor, because he was a worse person, and also most of the time when you're a doctor, you don't... Dying in the middle of a brain surgery doesn't really, like, help the patient.
It's not. Doctors aren't really like, you know, doctors are great. They put a lot of effort into helping people, and they're usually very good people. But, like, you know, it's not dying isn't like, you're not putting your life on the line.
The most self-sacrifice you have is, like, working really long hours, which is commendable for sure, but, like, it's not...
Dying is, like,
It's not, like, superhero self-sacrifice.
Like, you're not, like... fighting to the death every other day, you know?
You know, you're doing important good. We're not shitting on doctors.
They do good work, and it's a very stressful job.
Yeah.
And they're very good for, like, putting up with it. And I mean, they do get paid a lot, so I'm sure that helps. But, like, they deserve it. They deserve to get paid a lot.
But, you know, basically we're saying that Doctor Strange went from not taking on patients that he thought would ruin his record to sticking himself in basically an eternal time loop of dying horribly to save people, and that's a big difference.
Yeah, and his was a little less gradual than the last one we talked about.
Yeah.
Because he just had some, you know, he got into a car crash because he was stupid. It was his fault he got into a car crash.
It was completely his fault, but you still felt bad for him.
Like,
because people do stupid shit all the
like,
time. It doesn't mean that their lives deserve to be ruined.
Like, you know, how like, plenty of people, like, look at their phone while they're driving. He wasn't his phone, it was like a weird dashboard thing, but still, I mean, you shouldn't do that because it's stupid and you'll die.
And if you kill someone else, I definitely don't feel bad for you because you killed someone by looking at a phone, but all he did was hurt himself, you know?
Yeah, he didn't kill anyone. He just, like, ran off the road and, like, almost died. So then his hands get all, like, his nerves get fucked up and he can't, like, use his hands properly anymore, which sucks. Mm-hmm. You still feel bad for him even though he's been nothing but a huge bitch. And that doesn't completely change him. He still continues to act like a huge bitch. You have a little more sympathy for him because he's having, like, because it's, like, you know, his life sucks right now, so he's a little stressed. But, like, still... And then, you know, he kind of goes to the wizard place and they kind of, like, put him in his fucking place. And then
they're like, you ain't shit, Steven.
And then he kind of gets better and that, like, does a lot for his character development. Like, basically having to prove that he's not. Like, they put up the ancient one, like, puts him in his place, and then they just kick him out, and then he has to just sit by the door for, like, 7 hours. And
they're like,
fine.
Basically, they made him prove that he has the capability to basically swallow his pride and his arrogance and admit that he doesn't know everything, and then learn something new.
Yeah, so once he was proven that he didn't know anything, he got better, like, almost just instantaneously. You know, meeting a wizard will change you, I suppose. And then from there, he continues to improve. He continues to get better as the movie goes on. Again, to the point, and then, like, partway through the movie, he kills someone in self-defense.
He was an evil dude
who
trying to kill people.
Who, like, who helped murder some other people that were there and then was trying to kill him, so he killed him. And then he instantly felt bad about it. And then from that point on, it becomes, like, I feel like he didn't realize that, the impression I got was that he didn't think he would feel that bad about it until he actually did, and then he was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
So then, like, that's another big leap forward in his character development. He probably becomes one of the most heroic people in the movie.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, ends up, you know, just, like, trapping himself in a time loop where he dies horribly for eternity to save the planet.
He doesn't have to stay there. Because the villain Dormammu gets bored, I guess. And is like, free me, and he's like, fine. It's as long as you promise, never
to stop your shit.
to stop your shit, never return, and also take you fucking cult with you.
Yeah.
So then they do, and he had good character development. I feel like we did a pretty bad job explaining it. But it was good. It was like
good.
it was less gradual, it was more in like big leaps.
Yeah.
Until like by the end he just became like pretty cool. And then it's a pretty common thing where it's like all the traits he had kind of remain, they're just like softened a lot.
Yeah, like he's still very self-assured.
Like the selfishness goes away, obviously, we talked about that. But like his huge ego becomes more of like endearing cockiness.
Yeah, like deserved cocky.
Like he's the Sorcerer Supreme. He deserves to be a little bit cocky.
He's very self-assured, but it's like
very
he's
confident.
also, you know, he's the Sorcerer Supreme. He knows his shit. And in the comics, because we've read those.
Some of them.
Yeah. He like, it's pretty similar, but it's like he went from being like a pretty selfish person, like in one of the comics, like I forget exactly what happened, but he ends up in this like weird dream thing where they try to like keep him in like a coma forever by basically giving him everything he ever wanted, and he's like, this isn't what I want. This is what I used to want when I was still a shithead. So it's like he had a lot of character development and went from basically the way he was in the beginning of the movie to someone who continues to use magic to help people, even though it is slowly killing him and is giving him a ton of horrific ailments that are arguably worse than his hands being fucked up. But because, you know, he has character development, he decides, I'm gonna keep using that to help people.
He doesn't have to deal with that in the movie.
Yeah, well, he kind of does in the movie, because, I mean, like, he goes there to learn how to heal his hands, and it's implied that there are a pretty, like a decent amount of people that go there and learn magic just so that they can heal themselves, and then they just leave and go about their lives and live a normal life, which is valid.
Yeah, the wizards are okay with that. They're like, yeah whatever, man.
Yeah, but, like, he still has fucked up hands. He never learned how to fix his hands. He learned how to help people instead.
The implication was that he could learn to fix his hands or become a wizard, which I guess doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Although, I guess maybe he just doesn't care anymore.
Maybe he's like, I got magic, I don't need these fucking hands.
Maybe it's like, you know, maybe like perpetually channeling magic into a certain part of your body to like keep them functioning properly just takes too much focus and you like can't do anything else there.
Yeah.
Though I guess he could theoretically, like, when he wasn't using magic, just channel it into his hands and use
Maybe he does. We haven't really seen him
doing anything
where he's not currently like, fuck, we gotta save the world. You know, like, well, I mean, like, there was that one scene in Infinity where he was like, I'm gonna go get a sandwich, you want anything warm? Like, but you couldn't really tell what his hands were doing.
Yeah, it's like, they haven't shown him doing anything involving his hand. At the end of the movie, they zoom in on his hands and they're still, like, fucked. So it's just, like, implied that he could have one or the other and he chose to be a wizard and help people.
Yeah. And then in the comics, literally one of his villains is just created out of the condensed pain and suffering that he and Wong had to siphon off of his being so he wouldn't just drop dead from how much magic he's using to help people.
Yeah, that's like a thing where it's like magic has like some kind of like repercussions physically.
It's like an eye for an eye kind of thing.
Which they kind of hint at in the movies a little bit, like a more indirect way, like less like, not like you use a spell, you have to vomit now. Like it's
like you saved the earth, now you got magic boils. Have fun with that.
It's like using different types of magic has like certain consequences.
Yeah.
and like only certain types, like it's implied that like everyday kind of magic doesn't really have those types of consequences, but like more powerful magic does.
Yeah. So I mean, that's he's changed a lot, and it's good.
And also, I forgot about, and then like his general asshole behavior just sort of devolves into like well-meaning sarcasm.
Yeah. A lot of these people basically everyone we're talking about started out as assholes and then ended up as nice people who are also very sarcastic, but in like a lovable sort of way. In a well-meaning kind of
well-meaning, friendly sarcasm.
Yeah.
So
we have two options. Do we go
like
for the...
we're being pretty incoherent in this. Whatever. We
could go to the less drastic one or the more drastic one.
Let's go to Sherlock.
Sherlock! Another Benedict Cumberbatch character who starts out kind of like a dick.
I guess Benedict Cumberbatch has just been typecast as an asshole who gets better by the end.
Yeah, that's valid.
So this is BBC Sherlock, if us talking about Benedict Cumberbatch. Like,
you off Sir Arthur Conan Doyle type of shit. Conan Doyle.
It's also Arthur Conan Doyle kind of shit. He made Sherlock.
Yeah, but like, it's
not
the book. It's not the books.
It's not original Victorian Sherlock.
It's safe to say that the creators took some liberties with the source material.
No shit.
So anyway, Sherlock starts off as a very detached asshole. He's kind of isolated for most of his life, never really fit in. For various reasons.
Doesn't give a shit.
Doesn't give a shit that he doesn't fit in. His older brother is the same way and is always just kind of like, people suck. So he's like, yeah, they do. And then he's basically discarded all other people, and like the whole concept of like friendship is like this frivolous, dumb thing that just gets in the way of his work. He doesn't give a shit about it. And he has very subtle character development because over the course of the show, it doesn't really feel like he's changing that much episode to episode. Like, he obviously is in, like, some ways, in, like bigger ways. Like, he's not just like, I don't need friends. Friends are stupid to being like,
I have friends.
I have friends.
Friends are nice. It's
but
it's like there'd be like a moment where he'd say something and you'd be like, hey, you would never have said that before. But like generally, it's like you didn't notice until you were forced to like look back and you were like, hey, he's different.
Yeah, it's like you didn't really like notice the changes. It just like everything that they changed about him felt really in character for him, and he just kind of got more and more development. And we learned more about him.
Gradual that you wouldn't even notice it until you like watched an earlier episode, or he said something that like struck you as like, wait, like that one time, I forget, it's been a fat minute since we've watched the show. It's like he's talking to Mycroft. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Microsoft.
It's been a while.
No, it's Mycroft.
It didn't sound right.
We need to rewatch this
I
show.
said it like with such confidence, and I was like, that doesn't sound like a human's
Can't
name.
believe Sherlock's brother is named Minecraft.
Anyway. But like he's talking about that like fucking hat,
Yeah.
You know that
the hat. TM.
There was like the not that hat. The like hat that one guy left. That like the really stupid one.
Oh yeah, the really dumb one, made out of like alpaca fur or whatever.
Yeah, and like he just said something about like friendship or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because they were talking about friends.
Yeah, they were like they were basically trying to beat each other with deductions, and then yeah, what it was like, Sherlock was like, well, obviously he's isolated, because if he had friends, he wouldn't walk around with this dumbass hat. And then Mycroft was like, maybe he just doesn't care. And then he was just like, and then Sherlock was like, oh, well, you'd know all about that, wouldn't you? And then Mycroft was like, well, you would.
Yeah, and he said something about, like Sherlock started, like, kind of twisting it from, like, pure, like, logical deductions to being like, hey, Mycroft, you should get some friends. Basically, Mycroft was like, what the fuck? And I was like, oh yeah, Sherlock wouldn't have never have done that before.
Yeah.
He's changed. So it was like,
it went from, like, Mycroft and Moriarty, and in the beginning, Sherlock would kind of, like, they called, like, Mycroft and Moriarty called, like, people, like, goldfish. And in the beginning, you got the impression that Sherlock would agree with them, but then when they actually started calling other people goldfish, you were kind of like, gross, and Sherlock was kind of like, gross.
Yeah, so, like, and, he just started caring about other people more. And there's another thing that's different is that there was nothing, like, super dramatic that happened. Like, everyone else had, like, a big, including, like, the last person we have on this list, like, something really, like, big happened to them. Like, you have moments you can point out that change them, but I guess he just sort of got nicer, like, via osmosis.
Yeah,
I guess.
He got nice friends, and they just rubbed off on him, and he went from being this, like, detached asshole, and then suddenly it's season 4, and the high-functioning sociopath has friends that are basically family to him, and he's, like, willing to die for them, and he can't, like, function without them.
He's great.
And, like, he just wants to protect them, and then when he can't, he, like, spirals out of control, and he basically, like, needs them for his sanity, and you're like, wow.
It's very, like, natural feeling. Because, like, generally that is how, like, people change. Like, obviously people do have, like, drastic life events that change them, but a lot of times people also just sort of gradually, like, people rub off on them, and, like, they just evolve over time for, like, seemingly no reason.
Yeah, and it's like, he's still he's still sarcastic, he's still kind of brash, he still sometimes says things that are rude, and then John's gotta be like, he doesn't mean that, he's just dumb. He cares a lot more. He kind of is like 12 from Doctor Who, like, genuinely cares about the well-being of people, but also needs to have, like, index cards to be like, I am sorry about the death of your loved one / pet. It's like, he cares about, being nice to people generally, but, like, he cares about the well-being of people, but he's bad at being polite. He doesn't care so much. He's still bad at being social.
Yeah, he's still bad at social interaction, but it's not because he doesn't care, it's just because he's, like, bad.
Just because he's bad. And, he kind of just, he's just became a very, like,
he was trying more. Like, in the beginning, he would literally just be rude because he didn't care. Sometimes he'd be rude on purpose because it worked better.
Yeah. And now he just kind of, like, would get caught up in things and then be like...
But he would, like, try. Like, you could notice him, like, trying to be nice to people, and everyone was like, hey, Sherlock, what the fuck?
Yeah, like, he tried, And then he just kind of became a more, like, genuinely happy, funny guy who's just, like, soft most of the time. Not really when he's, like, deducting things.
He still has his, like, logic, like, detective mode engaged.
Yeah, but, like, a lot of times he's just, like chilling around, like, tweeting,
like, nice.
Asking people what flavor of popsicle
that was kind of
they
abrupt. It's like he disappeared for, like, there was, like, a break between seasons. Suddenly he was like, woo!
He's like, anywho.
He's like, cookies, yeah. It's like, it didn't feel super out of place. It felt like that's what
I loved it. It was just the natural progression.
I didn't like
and then it makes a lot of sense, like, the way his character got developed, because it's like remember what Mrs. Hudson said in the 4th season when, like, she was talking about how, like, she was just like, what does he do when he, like, gets frustrated at a case or, like, gets a bill in the mail or something? He, like, stabs it to the mantelpiece. He's never been this, like, stone cold logical guy. Like, he's logical, but he's never been just this, like, machine like you guys thought he was. He's an emotional person. And then you're like, oh fuck, she's right. He's always been like this. It's just became more prevalent.
He just, like, suppressed it.
It's just become more prevalent, and, like, he's found ways to, you know, express it other than aggression.
Nice.
Nice, cool.
I really like season 4. A lot of people thought it was garbage. I don't really care.
I wonder why they all thought it was garbage. It's probably cause we all know why everyone thought it was good.
There was a direct correlation between people who didn't like season 4 and people who shipped John and Sherlock, and that's the only thing I'm saying.
We got some tea on that, which we've already talked about.
And anyone who was like saying it was like queer baiting or whatever, you
don't understand what queer baiting is.
Queer baiting means isn't like listen, there's like a common thing in the way to be like casuals don't understand John Locke, and it's like here's a tip, if it's like, listen, queer baiting can be like hard to tell because a lot of it like depends on like intention, which you kind of just have to take people's word for it on what their intention was. But like if only people who are really obsessed with the show and like analyze every second of it get that vibe, the chances are it wasn't intentional.
And especially since it literally every turn, like these people were like they would be like, just Sherlock and John get together, and they'd be like, no, what? No. And then like people would just be like, oh, they're lying.
Which,
and
like,
it's like,
they
you know,
do that.
they did lie about things, but you also can't say they were queer baiting because it turns out they weren't lying to you.
The point of queer baiting is to like string people along to get like LGBT people to watch it when they don't like, when maybe they wouldn't like, because like they want representation, but like, you know, and if you're trying to do that, you don't tell them in every episode, every second, every chance you get that it's not going to happen. This is not how it works. That's not what it is. Anyway, that's off topic.
This is a tangent, you know? I just like it because one of the things I really like, which we might have discussed in a podcast that was solely about how we headcanon Sherlock is AOL Ace, but you know, even though they made him like a more like compassionate person throughout the series and like showed like, hey, he's human, he has emotions, he's not like a sociopath. Like a lot of people thought in the beginning when he was like, oh, I don't date, I'm married to my work, it was like, oh, okay, that's the whole like, ooh, sociopath thing. But it's like even at the end of the show, he wasn't any more interested in romance. He just had friends now. Like, it just genuinely is not something he cares about, even when he's not, you know, pretending to be a sociopath anymore. Like, he likes his friends, and that's about all he's here for, and I appreciate that. You know, that they're not, like, that they weren't, like, some other things where they try to, like, emphasize how inhuman someone is by being like, look at them, they don't have romantic feelings. And it's like, look at him, he doesn't have romantic feelings, and he never will because he is Sherlock and he ain't about that life.
Anyway, yeah, his was like a nice, subtle, gradual, very like unique character arc, and I liked it very much.
I liked it a lot. I like Sherlock a lot. We gotta rewatch that. I haven't watched it in a while.
Show. Anyway, on to our last character.
I bet you never saw this coming. It's Tony fucking Stark. Who else would it be? You knew this was coming.
So again, he was kind of like,
I realized that we forgot to put a spoiler warning in front of literally all of it. We will be, okay, here's the thing. We will be spoiling things. Many things. We didn't spoil Endgame when we were talking about Doctor Strange, I don't think.
No, we didn't talk about his character. He didn't have a character. He wasn't even...
I think you mentioned in Endgame when he, like, held up his hand, but, like, that could
No, I
be
didn't
anything.
mention that in this podcast, but now you've mentioned it. We didn't talk...
Oh, no, there was a close-up shot of Doctor Strange's hand you know, that big thing that's a big part of his character at some point in the movie, just like there was in every other movie he's been in. Wow.
But no, we didn't mention Endgame at all. We were just talking about his, like, first movie. Cause
Right.
That's where, like, his character, that's what his
We
character
mentioned
is.
Infinity War a little bit, but okay, we're gonna be spoiling the shit out of Endgame in this section. Probably a little bit, at least a little bit.
Well, it's good we put this at the end, because, I mainly focused on, like, the first movie here. Like,
I talked about every movie he's been in, basically.
Yeah, I mentioned, like, his first one, and then, like, a little bit, like, the Avengers. I was trying to, like, avoid spoiling Endgame, but this one's at the end, so you can just click out of this video now.
Yeah. We're going to be briefly discussing Endgame, not dropping any huge spoilers, but if you don't want spoilers, just don't watch this part. Just know that Tony has really good character development.
As he always has.
As he always has. It's good. Anyway, moving on. You've been warmed.
Warmed?
You've been warmed. Okay, you've been warned. So this dude
also goes from, like, Doctor Strange, from completely selfish, egotistical asshole to actual decent human being and hero.
Yeah.
Thick 180.
He was cocky.
Honestly, even worse than Steven.
Uh-huh.
Because, at least, like, Steven was, like, a doctor, and, he might not have been doing it for, like, the reasons he was doing that might have been selfish, but it still has, like, a positive effect. Like, he was still helping people. No matter, like, why he was doing it, he was still helping people. Tony Stark is literally called the Merchant of Death. So, like, that's not great.
Yeah.
That's a pretty rough way to start.
He started out very cocky, self-absorbed, huge dick that did things for the money and the gratification and didn't care about how his actions affected people around him. People would be like, how do you feel about being called a Merchant of Death? And he was just like, fuck you, I don't care. People are getting murdered by my missiles. Well, they're the bad guys, right? Wrong.
So, yeah, he's like, that was a pretty, like, gutsy move by Marvel, an independent studio, for their first movie. It's just be like, it's our first movie. The main character's the worst. Take it. Take the movie.
It's like, okay. I mean, it worked out just fine. But by the end of his first movie, he improved a lot. He got kidnapped by terrorists, realized that they were using his weapons to kill people, and he was like, maybe I just shouldn't make weapons anymore because killing people is not good.
Yeah, his was probably the fastest character arcs of the ones that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Because, like, he was like, because while it did take a little bit of, because while he did improve as the movie went on, most of it literally, like, he just saw what his weapons were doing firsthand and was immediately like, well, gotta not do that ever. Stop
literally
that right
in, like, the opening scene of the movie. Because the opening scene of the movie is he's going to, like, a base to be like, ooh, here's my new weapon, and he's in, like, a military vehicle, and then it starts getting, like, shot at and blown the fuck up, and he's, like, running, because, he's like, fuck this, I'm not here to die, and he, like, hides behind a rock. And then a missile just crashes next to him that's got his fucking name on it. And he's like, oh shit. And that's pretty much like, that's when he was like, partially.
It takes like a little longer than that.
It takes a little longer than that, but that's pretty much when
when
the realization struck that his weapons are, doing not good things.
And then, like, as soon as he was rescued, he was basically just like, yeah, well, time to stop doing what I was doing immediately in every way. Just redo my whole self. Everything
he, like,
about
shuts
me
down.
needs to stop.
He shuts down the weapons and is like, hey, I used this thing to, like, keep my heart from dying, but, like, we could probably use this to, like, power things, and he literally decided that instead being a weapons manufacturer, he was going to become one of the world's pioneers in clean energy, which is a 180 if I've ever seen one.
It's almost so endearing. It's almost like he was just like, well, shit. Now I gotta like rethink my entire life. What do like decent humans do with like intelligence and wealth? Clean energy, that's pretty good, right? That's what decent humans do that.
It's like he Googled what do good people do, and then he was like, yes. And they were like, develop clean energy, and he's like, shit, that's what we do. And it's like, I love it, man. And, you know, he realized throughout the course of his first movie that he has the potential to actually help people and earn the praise that people have been giving him for years. Because, you know, people were always like, Tony Stark, he's the coolest when he was, you know, shithead. And now he can be like, hey, now I actually deserve, I can do something that actually, like, means that I am deserving of people saying I'm cool.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, his character development is interesting because kind of like most of the other characters that we talked about, they still have that like narcissistic cockiness, but it's been earned over time.
But also, it's like, sorry, but like the thing about his character being so quick is that usually that's like not good. For characters, usually it's better if they're more casual, but like it really works.
It really
like,
works for
like what happened.
Yeah, it really works for what happened to him. It works for his personality. He's very headstrong. He's very like, go now, do the thing. Yeah. And his character becomes way more complex as, you know, Marvel progresses its thing. And then, you know, like, his cockiness has definitely been earned. And you can tell that over the years, it kind of went from being his personality to being a way to mask his own self-hatred to just being his sense of humor. That's just what he thinks is funny.
And, like, it took a couple more movies for, like, the ego thing to kind of go away, because, like, in one of, I think it was either the second or the third one. I can't even fucking remember what happened to the second Iron Man movie.
That was the one with the guy with the whips.
Oh, yeah.
Who was like,
a thick minute
your dad hurt my dad, so I'm gonna fuck you up. Until he was like, why?
Motivation.
That's
like,
why a lot of people didn't like that movie.
You're vaguely, but it's like so many things do it. It's like, you're vaguely related to someone who wronged me, so now I'm gonna fuck you up, even though you specifically didn't do anything to me. You had nothing to do with any of this. But anyway, I forgot about that. But I guess it was the third one then. He still has like kind of like ego thing. Like I remember that like big old. What was it? The second one? I don't know. I don't fucking remember. It's been a while. He was, like,
we can never find like, these movies anywhere to watch them.
He had like that like technology expo thing. And he had, like, that really, like, narcissistic opening thing. You remember that part of the movie? It was very, like, self-congratulatory, like, introduction.
Oh, is that the one where they had, like, the Iron Man suits coming down? They were, like, shooting off fireworks, and he was like, yeah! Yeah, I remember that. I was like, you mean the one from Civil War where he talked about his parents dying?
No, not that one. That was fun. That was after his ego had, like, been toned down to,
what
like...
are you talking about?
No, that was in Civil War, not one of the Iron Man movies.
I know, that's why I was so confused, because I couldn't remember any of that.
I think that was Iron Man 3. So by the end of that movie, he's, like, he was, like, fully, like, his ego's just sort of subsided into, like, endearing cockiness.
Yeah.
Which is well earned. He deserves to be cocky.
He's fucking Iron Man.
His cockiness is valid.
Yeah.
So, like, at that point, like, you know, he definitely got less egotistical, but, like, it took a couple more movies for, like, that part to, like, be fully, like, gone, which is fair.
Yeah.
That's good.
And it's, like, yeah, he got less, like, kind of, like, obnoxiously cocky and more, like, I'm Tony Stark, I'm cool, and it's, like, that's
more, like,
valid.
Confident.
Yeah, like, just very self-assured. And he went from being the guy who would, like, never put himself on the line for anything, or, like, change his behavior from anything. The guy who was willing to get blown up by a nuke in the first Avengers in space to save New York.
I mean, he was, like, ready to die to save others by the end of, like, the first movie.
Yeah.
Like, maybe, like, that one was, like, a little more likely that he was gonna live, but he was, like, you know, fighting on top of the building. And he was like, just blow the whole thing up. And it's like, but you'll, and Pepper was like, but you'll die. And he's like, yeah, it's fine. I can't, though, it's been a while, so I can't remember if he had, like, a plan to survive that, or if he was just like,
I think he was just kind of betting, hoping that he wouldn't die.
He's just kind of crossing his fingers. Yeah, that's like
that's a big different. Oh, you can go.
Apparently, that's just a common end to a character. If someone was selfish at the beginning, just have them sacrifice themselves at the end. You don't have to actually kill them, because it's the thought that counts.
Yeah, that's the big difference between Tony and Thor, is that when someone's like, Tony, you'll die, he'll be like, that's fine, just keep going with the plan. And then if someone's like, Thor, you'll die, he's like, only if I die.
Oh, Thor.
Gotta love Thor. He also had pretty good character development.
Yeah, also, Marvel really likes writing, like, selfish assholes, don't they?
He wasn't, like, as selfish.
He was just more narcissistic.
He was just narcissistic. He was like, I'm gonna be king. And then, you know, by the end of Endgame, he was like, I don't even want to be king. I just want to live my life. I've suffered enough. Just let me... like, yes, you have, Thor. You live your life. You know? But back to Tony. I mean, and then throughout, like, the Avengers movies and just the other Iron Man movies, you know, he started to deal with, like, anxiety. He started to deal with, you know, like, his issues with, you know, how bad his dad fucked him up. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he just, like, learned to really and truly care for other people and care about how his actions, you know, like, affect them, which is basically the whole thing with Civil War. A lot of people, like, got real pissed at Tony for that movie. But it's just indicative of how much his character has changed. Because in the beginning, you think he didn't give a shit about what... He made weapons, and he didn't give a shit that they were killing people. When literally literally all they were used for was killing people. And then in Civil War, he wanted really desperately to be made accountable and to do anything that he could to prevent people from dying, even though the people that died would have died anyway if they weren't there.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in New York, when, you know, like, they showed Hulk, like, crushing someone with concrete. Pretty bad shit. But also, if the Avengers weren't there, either the whole world would have been destroyed by aliens, or everyone in New York would have been blown up by a nuke.
Yeah, it was pretty rich of the government to come in and, like, use that New York battle of, like, evidence that you killed people when they shot a fucking nuke at New York. And it's like, you couldn't have a problem with collateral damage before, did you?
Yeah, like, you know... It's like, even though it's very indicative of how much he's grown as a person, that he cares more about how his actions are affecting people, even when what he's doing is for the greater good, than he did when his actions were only benefiting him.
Yeah.
So that's cool, you know? You know, he became a person that was full of love for his friends and his family, and he wasn't just willing to put other people's safety above his own. He literally would be unable to live with himself if he didn't help people when he could.
Yeah, and one thing that was cool, is that his character arc was, like, almost entirely in like, an internal thing, at least, like, the first, like, phase of it was, where, like, you know, he saw what his weapons were doing and was immediately like, well, like,
time to
reinvent myself. I
myself.
mentioned at the beginning would come back. It was like no one had to convince him no one had to give him, like, a speech to, like, get him to be that. He just saw what was happening and then immediately came to the conclusion that he was a shitty person. And he needed to fix.
He did essentially wake up one morning, think, I'm a dick. I need to change everything about myself.
Up that morning. He got a missile with his own name at it, shot at him, and then decided.
As someone on Tumblr once said, you know you're fucked when there's a missile in front of you that literally has your name on it.
Yeah, so like he got his own, so he had to witness his own missiles kill people. Then he was like, I'm a shitty person. But,
yeah, and then that, like, one dude who was in the cave with him, like, sacrificed himself so Tony could escape, and he was like...
Well, now I definitely...
He's like, I'm not going to, you know, have this genuinely good person who had, like, a family that he could go home to, you know, save my lowly bitch ass just for me to go back and keep doing the same shit I was doing. I had to go and do something that made me worth saving.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, all of that, like...
I love him so much!
While he had, like, influences from, like, outside places, like, no one told him to do that. He just saw, like... He saw what his missiles were doing. Someone died for him, and he came to the conclusion himself that he has to be the type of... that he has to stop with, like, the missile thing, and also be the type of person who is worth, like, saving.
Exactly.
And then he did it, like, so quickly. Like, it was, like, immediate. Like, everyone was, like...
Everyone got whiplash.
Because it was, like, you know, he disappears for, like, 3 months. He was kidnapped by terrorists. And then he comes back and he's just, like, you know, the really cocky, narcissistic asshole who was, like, making weapons. Is like, hey, yeah, the company that literally has mostly made weapons, like, only forever. We're not doing that anymore. Anyway, I'm also, like, really different in every way.
Give me a cheeseburger. You know... Anyway, that's pretty much all I gotta say. I just love all these people a lot. And good characters
one thing that was
the key to good writing.
I have one more thing about Tony. Was that he was, like, still, like, a pretty flawed character.
Yeah.
By,
they
like,
all
the
were,
end of it.
really.
Well, yeah, it's, like, a lot of times, though, it's, like, glaring, like, with characters, like, glaring character flaws are kind of, like, totally erased, which is what they're for, so, like... But then it's like, you know, they're still a flawed character, they still usually make mistakes, but he was still, like, he still has some pretty, like, he just still fucked up pretty bad a couple times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was just for good reasons.
Yeah, it wasn't just because he was a selfish asshole, it was because he was trying to do better, but sometimes you just make the wrong decision, especially when so much is riding on your decisions. It happens, you know? It's like, sometimes it just be that way. Anyway, I love these characters a lot, and if you want to have good media, write good characters, because you could have a lame-ass plot, but, like, if the characters are good, we out here.
Maybe that's just us, but
maybe it's just us, but, like, preferably you have both, but, like, characters important anyway.
Character
Bye.
development is important.
It is.
Bye.